Hey everyone, welcome to the Solo to Entrepreneur Show. You with me, Lorraine Chai, the host. Now today we welcome Katie Rossler, a licensed therapist or relationship coach with about 15 years or 15 years and
Yeah,
over
over 15 years now.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's been helping high achieving individuals and couples through life's most complex intersection, the whole concept of relationship. So, Katie, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, there's a question I want to ask is where you're originally American, who is currently in Germany, right? And
hmm
you relocated from one country to the next. And pe everyone that tunes into my podcast knows that I have migrated twice. For you to migrate and still continue on with your business, how was that for you?
Oh, it was such a big challenge. We moved here 9 years ago, and I expected not to be able to work here. They don't recognize my license or some of my schooling, which always was so bizarre to me because in the United States, where I got licensed in Virginia, is one of the harder states. And there's so many things you have to get through to get licensed that
Mm,
moving here and going none of that mattered was really like an ego hit. So I initially thought I won't be able to work, and thankfully ran into a psychiatrist and couples therapist, and he and I did a little research together, and I worked for him for a period of time. And he's like, you're really good at what you do. And I'm like, yeah, because I've done it for a while now, and like I know my stuff, but I don't know how to work here. And that's where we sort of navigated that I could do like workshops and
mm,
trainings. And then from that, I could do more like coaching. And so I like to call myself a relationship strategist because really in that time of doing more workshops and teaching, I really shifted my approach in working with couples to letting go of the traditional like you come to session and vent fest and then we try to navigate out the problems to how about we start learning relationship skills in the beginning so that after about 3 months in of working with me, then you can come with the fires that happen that week or that month. And we use the framework, you now know how to approach it through that lens. And I found that couples were having so much more progress in that way. And that would not have happened. I really don't think I would have gotten there had I not had to relocate, completely shift how I work, think I wouldn't be able to work, and then kind of go, okay, what do I want this to look like? And the 9 years I've been here, I really think about six of them, five, six of them, I've worked primarily in my field. I have done different iterations. For a period of time, I was doing really focused grief work. Then I was doing more like individuals. But my heart has always gone back to couples. My degree is marriage and family therapy. And so it made sense for me to move to a city like Munich, where there's so many bicultural couples who are navigating what my husband and I are navigating and going, okay, how can I support you guys in a way that's really unique to your relationship
mm.
amidst all of the normal, if you have kids or don't have kids, career changes, all of these things that most couples go through. But you have a different lens. And so that was it, it had so many challenges in the beginning, and then it started just like moving forward quite quickly once I realized I can find a lane and I can work in a unique way versus how I was trained.
But the thing, like with you migrating and you asking that question for somebody to kind of redirect you in the right path towards what you can do for your career. So, take like the way that I've done it here is being so new in the area and making it work for me is understanding what is the need in the local area, right? So, for
hmm
you is also understanding the culture because everything is different in terms
Yes.
of the way people communicate and the way that people look at things and live, for you to be so new to ask that question and actually just be open to evolve and adapt and change according to your surroundings and your situation and taking it to your advantage.
I think that's important in business that we are adaptable and flexible, but we also know when to hold firm, right? To go
Mm.
like, no, I am going to do it this way. I am going to do this thing. And when you move to another country, I think the key is being adaptable and flexible. Because if you come into a new culture with, well, this is how I did in my home country and this is what my culture accepts, you're losing out on the richness of learning from where you are and saying, okay, how can I pivot? How can I just word something differently, right? Like
Mm,
maybe my approach needs to be softer, or maybe it's more direct. Versus in the States, I probably would have been a little more, bubbly and lovey and like, oh, and then maybe we'll talk about this a little bit, and it's softer. Whereas here, with these couples, I'm much more direct. They want to get to the point, and it's just different in this area where I am, but also the types of couples who are attracted to the way I work are goal oriented. They, just say it, just like call a spade, and I appreciate that. But had I not taken the time to really get to know where I was and what these couples need, I would have still been approaching it my old way.
mm. Yeah, can absolutely understand that. So with you and your husband and with you with having your own business, there are couples where no, you have to be a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad. How did you work with your spouse as well as your clients in terms of someone that is very independent like yourself having your own business and your husband has having his own?
Yeah. So in the beginning, I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I had worked with teenagers for several years who were in a locked facility. And though they were from much different area than my husband and I were raising our children, I knew I wanted to stay home and be an emotional support from the beginning, and that later I could go back to my work. So I took probably about 2.5, 3 years off, 3 years, because I had two of our daughters during that time. And then that was the point where I started going stir crazy. And I was like, I will sell makeup, I will sell cleaning products. I don't care. Give me something. Like I need work. And I still had that very westernized, like bringing in an income shows my worth. And so it was like, oh God, okay. So I'm not showing any worth because I have no income coming in other than what the government in Germany pays me for having kids. Thank you, government. But it's like, what else?
Sounds like Australia
And
here.
right, like, come on, thanks. But I knew for myself this wasn't working, and my husband saw it.
Mm,
And I think when I threatened to like really sell, you know, non-toxic cleaning products and was like, I'm gonna figure out how to, and he was like, no, we're gonna contact that psychiatrist we met at the playground with his grandson. You're gonna ask him about that research he's doing, and we're gonna get you into your work. And I really appreciate my husband for encouraging that because it would
mm,
have been very easy for him to just be like, you know, but you're with the kids and this is the best time and da 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 and like really trying to guilt or shame me into, though he would have
mm,
probably thought he was encouraging, but guilt or shame me into staying. But it has always been because he is a business owner, and because it is like a brick and mortar, he's got to be there. He is the head of his company. My work does have to be the more flexible. And that was something we both came to agreement on. We have three girls, and I love my husband, but he is a very German guy. And they need their mama when they've had a bad day at school to come home and like listen and remember the stories they said last week and be like, "Girl, I'm so sorry she did that again to you," right? And instead of their father who might be, well, logical, like, well, I think I'd feel that way too if you did that to me. Whoo, okay, that's not that
yeah.
doesn't help your child work through their feelings. So for me, it makes sense. We've never really had the fight around I should have stayed home more or I should be home more and doing more of the work. We have had the work share, like that workload share
Mm,
discussion of, okay, well, as my business grows and I'm still making sure I can take care of the kids, who's taking care of the house? And that is one that we butt heads on. You know, I am in a state in Germany that is very patriarchy, whether they think they are progressive or not, they're not.
mm,
And my husband, as much as he is really growing in so many different ways, especially having daughters, he still will go without meaning to the, well, you're home, well, you're the woman, and I'm like,
yeah.
whoo. So, but the whole point in all of that is just to keep communicating. And we've
Mm,
always been good about that, having the discussions. He would love nothing more than to have more time at home. And so, we have our own visions for our careers and what things will look like. But we have to, and we had to have a lot of difficult conversations and cultural conversations around the topic of who raises the kids or what, that work share load looks like when it comes to our home. And often I think that's where people like, if they hit the brick wall enough, they give up.
Mm,
We both are stubborn enough that we're like, well, we're going to just both take sledgehammers to this brick wall. It might be it from different angles, but we're at some point we're going to come to a compromise or a common ground. And I've always valued that because I didn't see that growing up with my parents. There was never real major arguments. It was always kind of one-sided with a military dad, and I appreciate having a sparring partner when it comes to like, well, I don't agree. Well, I don't agree either. Okay, well, what do we do then when you don't both agree with those pieces? But I think a lot of female business owners, especially if you've got kids, if those conversations aren't happening, or if you're starting your business later on, when the kids still need you, but you're like, I need me and I need to grow this business, it can be, I call them like temper tantrums, where what was in harmony in the
mm,
relationship and in the home needs to be offset. It makes sense, but it will cause temper tantrums. It will cause reactions, and that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. But honest and open conversation throughout the whole process is key. And I think we also have to get a tougher skin to hearing our partner's point of view because sometimes it's the first thing that comes to mind, and that tends to have a cultural flair to it or a family thing, right? Well,
right.
my mom never complained. Great. Right? Like
Yeah. So with
awesome.
the difference in culture, right? Like German, the German that we know of, right? The typical German, as we say. For you and your husband, how did you guys work in terms of the communication? Because sometimes people are expecting us to change or get the situation or understand the conversation in an instantaneous kind of mode. But for you and your husband, like how did you make it work with the difference in culture and communication, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, because even though he was good in English when we first met, he wasn't fully fluent until he really moved to the States and was working fully in English and being with me and living together. So even now, there'll be words that he says, and I'm like, are you sure you mean that word?
Right. Yes.
And
Right.
he's like, what does it mean to you? Like, hold on.
Right. Yeah. Because we know people come from a good place, but
Yeah.
what it sounds like to us or the other person may mean completely different, even though we know it comes from a good place.
Yes. Yeah. I think often you have to give a lot of grace to your partner and you have to learn how to get back to balance. If they've said something that triggers in you a reaction,
Right.
and then you realize they didn't mean to say that, you have to learn. You have to do that work. They don't need to make it up to you. How to calm yourself down and go, okay, I can reroute knowing this is what you meant to say. And let's move forward that way. That takes practice. And that
Mm.
takes a lot of inner work to know your triggers.
Yeah.
But for us, the cultural differences, we didn't always recognize. I mean, we had hours, multiple long fight about ketchup on the table for a
Okay.
meal between just me and him. It's way before kids. And it wasn't until like, I mean, I was like, are we really hashing out this thing on ketchup? And I think at some point I said, is this a cultural difference? And that's when he was like, it may be, but, and it was like,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
that's the piece where the longer we've been together, the more I work with couples in this way, the more I'm able to see it, even though they can't see it. And I can go, hey, I really think there's a cultural difference here. Let's explore that before we get into
Mm,
attacking each other. That helps. If we know that, then we can understand they're not personally attacking me because of me. They're not doing this to be a pain in my ass. They're actually doing this because this is what they know to be true. And I find the longer we're with our partner and the older we get, we fall back to cultural conditioning more than we realize.
mm.
Like, I feel like there's something like we're sharp in our 20s and 30s and like 40s, 50s, 60s. I see people start to like revert back. And I'm like, do you realize you're doing that thing that annoys you about your culture? And they're like, oh, oh my God, I am. I'm like, so it just naturally starts to happen. And I see more and more clashes, couples who've been together 10, 15 plus years. And they're not seeing it anymore.
Mm.
They think
But
this is
just
just
like business,
college.
right? It's all the concept of adapting
Yeah.
to what is different from what we were brought up with, right? So even with
Yes.
people from the city and people in the suburbs and things like that, like there is some sort of cultural differences. And it's more of looking into it and experiencing it from the other person's point of view, but also trying to find a neutral ground between the two where it's understandable between the two parties.
Right. And you have to be willing to do that work. I think a lot of people go into a relationship, if you've never been in a bicultural relationship before and you've only dated someone from your own culture, and then you go into that, you at first you're like, ooh, cultural differences. But the longer you're together, even a year or two in, you don't think to have the discussions like, what traditions and holidays will we celebrate in what ways?
Mm,
Especially then if you move to one of the person's home countries, or if you meet in one of their home countries and you stay there, there's this assumption, well, it's a public holiday. This is how we do it. And it's like, well, it's not what I grew up with, so I'd like to do things differently. We have to be willing to put our ego and pride aside that we attach to our cultural conditioning and say, I mean, I've always done it this way. I'm not quite sure why we did it this way. It makes me feel a little sense of home. So maybe we can bring this into the new way we celebrate it. But yeah, I see that maybe we should celebrate it differently or we should do this differently. Um, we just think, ooh, when we first are attracted to them, like, oh, cultural, oh, your accent, oh, all of these things, and you're not going like, and this will come with it a lot of talking about
right,
what we want, what our values are. We
right.
might think we're saying the same words when we're talking about values, but we might be talking about totally different things. My husband and I have both the value of freedom, and his looks very different than mine. You would think freedom would be the same thing. No, it isn't. So it's being able to take apart the values you think you both have and go, what do you mean when you say your value is, integrity first? What does that look like exactly? How would it play out so that I understand what that means, or being honest, or, whatever it might be. Um, those are pieces we don't think about, but we
Mm.
have to get more clear on with each other.
So when you talked about balance just now, I know balance is very important, and I always tell my clients there is a balance between work, family, but also yourself. Like people tend to forget that last piece of the puzzle, isn't it? Like you are very important. And it's like being on a plane. They always say put the mask on yourself first before you put
Yep.
the mask on anyone else. So how do you help your clients with the whole concept of balance?
Yeah, one of the things that's important to me when I work with a couple is if they're willing to, I work with them individually too.
Mm,
And what I do in the individual work is not allow them just to complain about their partner. I go, what are you doing to have anger outlets? What are the ways you're making sure you get good sleep and you're taking care of your health? Because all of that impacts our relationship and adds to things getting worse. So I'm very self-care focused in those sessions about, yes, you were triggered by that and you reacted like a volcano. Let's get into what are the outlets you have for those emotions and figure out the source of that volcano. So it's always very present. If I can tell somebody has slept really horribly for like, which if people with young kids are like, when am I going to sleep? I get it. I have three, I get it. But there is a point where you have to say, then I am not going to be able to show up as well as a partner. And yes, my partner should give me grace, but it also doesn't give me permission to just say whatever comes to mind.
mm,
It means even more so that I need to say, hey, I can't have this conversation right now. I haven't slept well. I'm going to be reactive. If you're okay with it, I'm going to go to bed early tonight. Can you take care of the kids for bedtime or whatever, and then put your phone away and go to bed early. These are the key pieces of us starting to know ourselves better. And yes, I agree. I always talk about like in a sense, parts of us need to come first, and our well-being is what impacts friendships, family members, relationships, our work. I mean, you and I both know if you have a good night's sleep, you're sharper the next day. You're like, pooh, I feel like $1,000,000 and I'm getting things done fast. If you've not slept great for days, you're forgetting things, it's sluggish, you know, you're sending the wrong email, you're saying the wrong
Mm.
thing. It impacts everything. So yes, we have to have that mindset that it's not selfish to take care of ourselves. It's actually relationship focused because it's like I want to take care of me so that I show up as a really great partner and I'm able to communicate more clearly. I'm not as reactive. I'm able to listen well. And it's a bit of an impossible dream in today's world because we're all working so many hours and we're, you know, overloading ourselves with information online and then we've got all the things we've signed up for and going to the gym and volunteering here and there and it's we've almost too much to ourselves. It makes sure that we can't always be good partners or good in business or anything we're doing. But it goes back to that root of what am I willing to sacrifice externally so I can make sure internally I'm good. And then
Mm.
I can really show up in relationship in a much healthier way.
So conversation and being open is a very tough thing for, I think, the majority of us, right? Because we don't want to show our vulnerable side, be it in the business or personally. And I know this firsthand where it's you don't tell people you have a problem. You because especially as a business owner, like you don't tell people that you need help because you have to portray or you want to portray yourself as someone that's successful. If you're not successful and you can't have a grip of your business, then why you're not smart enough to have a business, you know? So
Right.
with all that concept of that stress to losing a loved one to, you know, wanting to be the head of the house in terms of the main income of the family, with all that stress, and because of that buildup of stress and people holding back in terms of the communication and sharing, what would you say would be the best option for people out there listening? Whatever grief or stress that they may have that is holding them back from actually expressing themselves or asking for help.
Yeah, I often say that if it feels difficult to speak out your needs and even writing them feels difficult, maybe writing is going to be easier. Then I would start with emotional outlets for the overwhelm you feel, the grief you feel, the anger you feel. That can be, I mean, literally there's endless possibilities. I mean, I love to go bowling when I'm angry because there's something about throwing that ball down the lane and hearing the pins get hit. But that's me. That wouldn't work for everybody, right?
Hmm.
Some people like to go to like rage rooms, or some people like to go for hikes by themselves or go fishing. There's all sorts of different outlets, but you have to discover what's yours so that you can release some of this internal pressure you have. And then I'm a really big believer in journaling. And I love really asking that question, why? So it's like, I don't want to ask for help. Why? Because I don't want to be perceived as weak. Why? Because weakness will mean, you know, and you just keep going and going and going till you get to the root of maybe it's you're afraid people won't want to be around you if you seem weak. Maybe you're afraid of being left alone, right? Or maybe you're afraid of failing in life and not never being enough. And then I always say to my clients who are like afraid to ask for help, I say, how does it feel when your friend calls you up and it's like, I need help? And they're like, well, I feel really honored. Like they took the time to call me and ask
Hmm.
me for help, especially if it's someone who doesn't usually. And I'm like, yeah, so why wouldn't you honor and respect another friend to allow them to have that experience too? And that's usually like a, oh, I didn't think about that. I'm like, yeah, because we're all in our heads about how we don't
Right.
want help. Instead of, I want to be able to give that gift to someone else to feel like, gosh, she or he chose me to be able to
Right.
support and help. Okay.
But it's also the
And
same concept of like an athlete, right? Like a pro
yeah,
athlete has a whole team of people working with them, be it someone in a dietitian monitoring their body to gym and the actual sport. And for us as business owners, like why can't we be as open to having people help us through our business as well as the emotional side of things, you know, to
yes.
be successful in our industry?
Definitely. And I can't think of any business leader that I listened to or have listened to who didn't talk about hitting that point where they realized they did need to ask for help and they were the ones getting in their own way. And once they
Mm.
asked for help, it was amazing. I will say one thing about asking for help. Often when we think, if you have the mindset, they won't know how to help me, you know, like it won't work anyways, you're going to always ask the people that confirm that for you. So
Hmm.
be very careful if you're going into, I need to ask for help, but I know they're not going to really be able to help me anyways, who you instantly gravitate towards talking to, because your brain is the perfect personal assistant, but it gets it wrong sometimes. So if you've said, I need help, but I know they're not really going to be able to help, your brain hears people who can't really help. So it's gonna like,
Mm.
well, let's call Aunt so and so, and let's call that one friend who's super opinionated who doesn't really know what they're talking about, or and we'll go for the route of people that really won't help. But if we can get really quiet with ourselves and say, I really need help. Here's specifically what I need help with. And I'm open and willing to talk with somebody who knows what they're doing. Then you just sort of scope out who you notice coming forward in your life or online, and you're like, ah, you know what? This would be a good discussion to have. Let's just see if they're willing to take a call with me, or I'll take them out for coffee.
Mm.
Our willingness to ask for help can be negatively impacted by us if we set it up for failure. So just be really mindful of that.
True, true. Now, with dealing with high achieving individuals and couples, I'm assuming sometimes hearing feedback is very tricky and
Hmm.
it takes time to kind of open and be acceptive of those feedback. So, how would you encourage people to take in feedback, or like with your, experience with your clients, like how has it worked for your clients that find it very difficult to take feedback?
Yeah, I actually, our very first session together is an assessment where I have them basically be consultants of their relationship. And we go over seven core areas. And I usually go like on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you rate communication? And in the prior to either of them saying a number, I say we're all adults here and we can hear if our partner thinks differently than us. So I want you to try your best not to alter your number because your partner said a higher number or a lower number. It will
Mm,
not help us. Like we are consultants, we're trying to improve this relationship. Think of it from that mindset. And I think sometimes we have to remember we are adults. We can hear feedback about the relationship. I made sure to say that because I'm not saying about you in the
mm,
relationship. About the relationship. I bring it out as its own entity because it is in many ways. And that already gets them used to giving feedback on something. And then we get into, okay, how do we, I do a lot of like assessments and individual tests with them on their arguing styles and different things, their personality. And then we start to discuss how does that show up in your relationship? Again, a bit like a consultant. How are we seeing this impact the company? What are we seeing? What are the things we want to see shift and change? Then we get into how to start to give that feedback. And is feedback even needed?
mm.
Sometimes we give feedback way more than it's needed. I was just working with a client today and she's like, I think my husband's new career idea is like he's feeling like I'm not supportive. And I said, well, why? And she's like, well, because I questioned every single one he brought up and I told him why I didn't think it was a good idea. And I was like, okay, so you gave feedback. It's like him giving you pearls and you stomped on them instead of going, oh, these are pretty pearls. Not for me. I don't really need to wear them, but you can have them. And that's the way we have to look at it. So sometimes it's not even about receiving feedback. I find there's more issue of people giving feedback before anyone's ready to receive it.
Mm. But it's
And
not like
that
some
tends
people
to be
don't
more of a
seem to
challenge.
identify how it would affect somebody else with giving the feedback, right?
Yeah.
So, sometimes people overshare and sometimes the overshare perceives themselves of, being a little bit too much. Or let's say,
Yeah.
um, you know, oh, you're trying to have your partner understand the process of how your brain works, but then it turns into a rant instead of being direct of what the situation is.
Yes, yes. And so if we think we don't receive feedback well, we have to be mindful not to then, as high achievers, we want to optimize, improve, like we're like, here's how I can see you could change this and make it better. Your partner's not asking for that feedback because you're not even willing to take it from yourself or from others.
Mm,
So it's very much when it comes to feedback, it's kind of get in your own lane and be willing to work on you being open to hearing that feedback. When it comes to businesses, I think sometimes we need to divorce ourselves from our business. I'm going to use a marital term. We get our identity is so wrapped up It's like it's we believe we're like Beyonce and doing brain surgeon or a brain surgeon, right? We're doing brain surgery. Like it's so everything. And we have to remember this is an entity outside of us that we're building, and it might fail or it might work, and people are going to have opinions and thoughts on that entity, but it isn't us. Even if you're a service-based provider like me and you are the face and everything, my work is not me. When I go to bed at night, I'm not going like, and how do you feel about that, honey? And what, on a scale of 1 to 10, what do you like? No. So it is different. The relationship strategist and Katie Rossler as a brand, that can get feedback. It doesn't feel good. But
Mm,
one thing over the last couple years that I've done is asked for more feedback in sessions, in Google Forms, talking with friends, even family members, how do you perceive me on this? What do you think about that? Like, give me feedback. Because I honestly, I think there are some personalities out there that most people don't give feedback to, and I think I'm one of those because it's just like she doesn't need the feedback. She's great, she's got it.
mm,
But if you don't encourage people to share with you, how did you experience that? What was that like for you? At the end of every session I have, 24 hours later, you get a how was your session?
mm,
It gives me feedback. What worked, what didn't, what did you like? It reminds them of what they talked about and has them think about what am I going to take away and work on this week. But it's also a feedback. Like, give me the feedback. Let's keep this loop open. So lean into it because when you lean into it, then you're welcoming it. And also be okay to say, I need a moment to process what you shared. Because that's where I'm hurt. I want to defend. I want to justify why I did that.
mm.
You don't know what you're talking about. Stop. Don't go with the gut instinct. That's a moment where you have to say, I am asking for feedback. I may not like it. I'm going to listen. And I might have to say, hey, can I get off the phone? I need to chew on this for a little bit. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk. And you just do that. But lean into the feedback. How else are we going to grow if we're just like staring at ourselves in the mirror? You don't ever know, like, is this
Yeah,
working? People like it? Is it
yeah.
needed? You have
All
to
right,
hear
so
feedback.
this is a dynamite question, right? When you hear the statement, well, Katie, you're a relationship therapist, you should know better.
Ooh,
Or
you should know
or
better.
Lorraine,
That's,
you're a business coach, like you should know what you're doing.
do
That
you know
that
what that
dynamite.
someone's shaming us, right? When they
Right.
say that, it's shaming you. And
Mm,
that speaks more about them than you. You should know better. I understand that you like to use shame as a control avenue. Like, I just flip it back on them. Like, well, you should know better than this. Really? Okay. So, shaming me isn't going to get the outcome you want.
mm,
And if you believe I should have more information on this or act differently or think differently, that's about you. How about you ask me more questions so you better understand what I'm sharing?
right. Like, oh, Tom, you're a business owner, you should know. Why aren't you
Right.
behaving this way, right?
You should know better than to, post that or say that or do that. Okay, but I did. So how would you like to approach this differently? Sometimes you can give them the benefit of the doubt and go, I'm not really receiving what you just said very well. Would you like to approach it differently? And
Mm,
then it puts the control back on them of like, you got to fix what you just said. That was rude. So we can do these types of things. But yes, you should is ridiculous. I mean, there is no one who is a total master of everything they do. We are all always learning.
right.
And so, yes, we might mess up and say things. I remember I interviewed for my podcast a gynecologist who specializes in menopause. She's from Ireland. She moved here to Germany several years ago. So when she entered perimenopause, she knew what she needed, but it was earlier than the age here in Germany that they think you go through it. Well, research shows starts around 35, 36. She went to the gynecologist, and her gynecologist was like, you should know better. You're too young. And she was like, she said it took her back, made her so angry, but she continued to push because she knew this is what other people go through with other gynecologists, right? Like this
Right.
is normal. And she
Right.
kept saying, no, I do know that I need to be on this. I do know what the research shows. But she said it took like, she really had to take a deep breath because there was this like shaming of her. How dare
Right.
you?
Yeah.
But she knew her stuff. It was the doctor who was wrong. It's not, like the other doctor. So sometimes their shoulds, you should know better, they're wrong and they just hadn't stopped to think, could I be wrong?
It could be said differently, right? The way that,
Absolutely.
it shouldn't be said that way. It could be
Yeah.
meant differently from what they're thinking in their heads. But the thing is,
Yeah.
we're all human at the end of the day. And it's more about sometimes, we're in a situation where we don't see blind spots ourselves. But
Yeah.
being reminded of something is, it's better than saying, why aren't you behaving that way? Or,
Right.
all right, yeah.
Right. Putting you in a box, in that situation, or like Tom or whomever, you can just be, he can come back and go, I think you're trying to give me feedback, but it's how it's coming off as shaming me. Can you say
Mm,
it differently? Like, we all need to be coached too. Those people who are shitting on you, you can repeat back like the or switch back and go, hey, I really think your approach is not working.
mm.
You should know better how to communicate with other people feedback. Right. But we're not going to do that but we can just say, hey, I'm not receiving what you said. Well, can you say it differently? I mean, I'm not understanding what you're trying to say because basically you're trying to shame me. Most people don't understand they're shaming people on a regular basis.
Mm,
Well, actually, well, you should know better. We say all these phrases that put them in lower than us. Well, you don't actually know what you're talking about or doing.
mm. No, this has been interesting. This has been really interesting. Now, I hope everyone has benefited from this conversation. Before we finish off, what is one advice you could give business owners out there that are trying to balance between business and their family?
Yeah, I think one big piece of advice is at the end of the day, you need to sit down and go, at my 90th birthday, when people come up and give a little talk about me, do I want them to say I was such a hard worker, I was gone all the time, I would made all this money, but I was never there for them? Or are we saying I was such a good support, I cared, I was at the piano lessons, I was around, and that's the values we should live by. You don't start doing that at 89, you do it right now. So reset your value system and create your business to match that. And it will create its own temper tantrums when we start to do that. Because in the beginning, you're like, well, I've made it all about my business, but it's your life. And you really have to be careful that you don't burn bridges that you hope later on will be there for that 90th birthday.
Mm, absolutely. Well, everyone, if you do like this episode, please do like, subscribe, and share this to those that you think may benefit from it. Also, I will put down Katie's link to all her social media and her website. Check out her podcast too. It's an amazing podcast. And yeah, follow and support her. And you never know, she may be able to help you through your journey with the relationship that you have with your other half. But Katie, thank you so much for coming on with me and having this conversation for yeah, for all those entrepreneurs out there.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. I really enjoyed it.
All right, guys, I'll see you next time. So tune in to our next episode, but I'll see you on the next one.